The Defense Department's nuclear submarine deal in the Pacific could take decades before the first sub could be deployed. But that's the wrong message to send to China. That's according to retired Army Major General John Ferrari. He's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute. General, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
The Chief of Naval Operations has said that it could take decades before a submarine actually hits the water under this deal. Why do you think that was a mistake?
Well, so first of all, the administration should be congratulated for the deal. It's a real strategic deal that enhances our presence in the Pacific and reinforces our deterrence in that area. So the problem, of course, it's like a lot of things we do in this country where we kind of message to the enemy or our adversaries, our weaknesses. And so in Afghanistan, it was, hey, we're going to go in and surge, but don't worry, we're going to be leaving in a short period of time. In this case, hey, we're going to do this nuclear submarine deal, but don't worry, China, it'll be 20 years before anything happens. And so we've essentially unmessaged ourselves and not altered the strategic chess match in the Pacific if we take that long. But fortunately, I think there are ways that if we wanted to, we can accelerate that.
So what do you think the message should be to China?
So the message should be that we can get boats in the water, the submarines in the water as quickly as possible. So there's two ways to do it. And I think one is submarines in the hands of the Australians under their command sends a big message that the Australians now have this. But that doesn't increase the number of submarines in the water, right? I think then also through either extending the life of current submarines and some other ways, there's ways to increase the number of subs in the water, which then changes the strategic calculus that China has to worry about.
All right, so let's drill down a little bit on all the things that would be required to speed that process along for deploying the subs. One thing that you mentioned in your article was training.
Yes, so there's a lot of expertise to operate nuclear reactors that has to happen. So we should immediately begin enrolling Australian service members into these programs to get them trained on nuclear reactors. The other thing that we should look at is, right, there's some legislation probably that has to be changed immediately that will allow us to lend lease, right? So in World War II, we didn't tell the Allies, hey, don't worry, it'll be 10 or 15 years before we get you equipment. We can have mixed crews using existing submarines that we put under the command of the Australians, which would send a very powerful message.
And as you said, you had recommended that some of our current nuclear-powered submarines not be retired while the new ones are built. But isn't there a substantial cost associated with that?
Well, when you look at how much money we're spending in the Pacific and to reinforce, right, that's actually a cost-effective way of actually getting more submarines in the water, extending the life. If you're looking at what they're talking about doing, which is a clean design of a new class of submarines that's going to take 20 years, well, that's a lot of cost, right? As opposed to using common training, common parts, extending the life of the Los Angeles class for the United States or the Trafalgar class for the Brits. And if you want a new submarine to get more in the water, right, you can extend those, using the current production lines that the British have for the Astute class, can get a brand new submarine in the water in 2028. And so, yes, the new submarines cost $2, $3, $4 billion, which is a lot of money. But in the big scheme of things, these are very powerful weapon systems that will cause the Chinese to expend even more money to deter them.
You say that we are in a period of strategic vulnerability with China. Why is that?
Well, because they're expanding their Navy. We saw just recently the hypersonic launch of a nuclear-capable missile that they did. We've seen them put nuclear missiles into the ground. They're expanding their Navy at a time when we are restricting our spending in defense. And so they're getting bigger and more powerful and more aggressive in the region, right? We see what they've done in Taiwan with their flights. They are testing the air defense zone of Taiwan and flooding it with aircraft. And they can afford, because they are close to Taiwan and close to the first island chain, to keep that level of activity up indefinitely. It stretches our force to do that over and over and over again. So they have the strategic advantage of time right now, which is why it's so important to get more submarines, right? Because the submarines, they don't have a counter to that, and it really will change their calculus.
So, I mean, How likely do you think it will be that your recommendations be heeded? I mean, you've made a lot of, interesting points.
Yeah, so I think it's up to the administration and the Congress, right? So I think the Congress needs to push and ask the Navy what needs to be changed and how do we go about doing this. If, President Kennedy in the 1960s, 1963, said we're going to put a person on the moon, this decade, and we did that in 9 years from start to finish. We certainly can figure out how to get these submarines into the hands of the Australians, even with mixed crews and extending the service life. And I think the Congress would be very supportive of all this.
All right. Well, General, thank you for talking to us about this, and nice to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.